Australia is one of the most unique and biodiverse countries in the world.
We have more species of plants and animals than 95% of countries on Earth. Sadly, this precious environment is not being properly protected. Since European settlement, 83 species of plants and 43 animal species have become extinct. And at present, some 380 animal species are classified as being either endangered or threatened.
Some of the main issues of biodiversity conservation concerning community groups are deforestation, agriculture clearing and overgrazing, overfishing and illegal fishing, pollution, and the introduction of exotic species.
The destruction of biodiversity is an important issue affecting all of us. Biodiversity underpins the health of the planet and the livelihood of our families, our communities, our nations, and our future generations. Essentially reduced biodiversity means millions of ordinary people like you and I face a future where food sources are scarce, disease is rife, oceans are dying, and fresh water is in short supply.
Conserving biodiversity also supports natural services such as clean air, clean land, clean water, and the recycling of waste through both the nitrogen and carbon cycles, just to name a few. These all contribute to better productivity of our land and water, which benefits people and society, and we get all these services for free. To provide you an example, the maintenance of health and mangrove populations is critical for the protection of human communities along the coast. They act as a natural buffer against severe storms and potential floods, whilst minimising land degradation and longshore drift. If human activity deteriorates the water quality, then insect and crustacean populations may fall. If this happens, then fish populations will also fall as they've lost their food source. And if fish populations disappear, mangrove plants have lost an important source of nutrients from fish deposits. So biodiversity is a fragile thing. If you impact one species, then a domino effect may occur, leading to a much more devastating outcome. But here's the good news. Grassroots community involvement is often the most effective way to protect our local environment and biodiversity from both corporate and government enterprise, and there are a number of options available to us. Planning and development is an approach that can be used to address environmental issues, as it demonstrates a proactive government approach where government bodies can be involved to issue licenses and allow development to take place.
A downside to this approach is that it is open to corruption and bribery, and so often there is a lack of resources at local council levels.
Here at Glenrock State Conservation Area, this place is protected under both the Heritage Act and Wildlife Parks Act. Any development that would occur in this area would need to be approved through submitting a conservation management plan, just like Scouts Australia had to do when building their lodges. But if a local business wished to develop land neighbouring Glenrock, they would need to seek approval from the relevant local council authority.
Market approaches include things such as carbon trade, biodiversity offsets, certification, trade in genetic resources and related knowledge, ecotourism, and watershed services. They aim to bring an economic approach to biodiversity in the hopes that economists would help to influence economic policies and adapt them to the needs of biodiversity conservation. This, however, works to an extent, but at the same time there is a tendency for this approach to adapt biodiversity conservation policies to mainstream economics rather than the other way around. Using the court system is another tool available to us all in protecting Australian biodiversity. This is possible through an important piece of federal legislation called the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999. What makes this important is that it gives ordinary citizens a legal opportunity to bring an environmental issue to court.
Common law is a law made by courts and decisions made by judges. The common law system provides courts with the opportunity to interpret legislation, settle disputes such as nuisance and trespass, and determine what the appropriate penalty or remedy should be if any wrongdoing is found. However, common law judgments aren't exactly a preferable means of protecting the environment. The emphasis lies on enforcing private rights and obligations rather than the interest of the public. The remedies sought are reactive. The damage has to occur first. Not to mention, taking on big corporations is an incredible financial burden and can often be drawn out over a long period of time. So by itself, the common law cannot be relied upon when protecting our biodiversity. But if the court system is used to interpret and enforce legislation, then it can be extremely effective, because in this way, it acts as a final safeguard for our biodiversity if business and government fail to take precaution first or enforce the rule of law. From a community perspective, people have the opportunity to bring evidence before judges to assess and point out where in the legislation a breach has occurred. An injunction can be granted to prevent an activity or development from continuing, and damages can be awarded to help restore any deterioration. Nonetheless, the court system is only preferable as a last means resort.
Consider this hypothetical scenario. A steelworks business has set up operations adjacent to Glen Rock. They disregard basic regulations to properly contain their toxic chemical byproducts. This pollution contaminates the creek flowing into Glen Rock and kills off the native frog species. Community advocates notice this. They notify the local council, but the council are hesitant in acting as the steelworks provides the community with funding and employment. So in this situation, where both business and government have failed in upholding environmental protection, it falls on community groups to bring this case before the court. So, to recap, here's what local communities can do to protect your local biodiversity. Lobby politicians at the federal level to make sure that they are doing real action on climate change. Know what legislation is relevant to protect your environment. And lastly, be actively involved when policy making in your local environment.